And now, from the Room 111 studios, it's Hacking Engagement with James Sternovin.
Well, what up, listener, and welcome back to the Hacking Engagement podcast. And I deserve to be reprimanded because I'm giving you another long episode after that big speech last week about, hey, this is a special episode. It's number 50. I'm going to go longer than usual. I did it again. And I promise you next week I'm going to be back to the 20 or 10 minute template. But this episode is awesome. I'm going to interview Norman Eng, Dr. Norman Eng, who is the author of an outstanding book called Teaching College, The Ultimate Guide to Lecturing, Presenting, and Engaging. Now, Dr. Eng is an adjunct education professor for the New York City University system. Dr. Eng and I just have this conversation that just keeps going because it's just so deep and rich. I didn't want it to end. I mean, this guy's a kindred spirit. He and I are on the same page. And we talk about teaching college. We talk about teaching K-12, which he has a strong background in K-12. We talk about how to make presentations better. But the focus of this program is this outstanding template. And it's called You, Y'all, and We. Now, that doesn't sound like New York City talk. And we're going to delve into that big time. This is a template you can apply to tomorrow's easy to do. Doesn't take any technology at all. Doesn't take any learning curve at all. You're going to hear it and you're going to want to do it. I promise, man. Buckle up. You're all going to love this episode. Hey there, listener. Please check out my book, Hacking Engagement, 50 Tips and Tools to Engage Teachers and Learners Daily. It's available on Amazon as of the late summer of 2016. And also check out hacklearning.org for a cornucopia of teacher empowerment resources. If you enjoy the Hacking Engagement podcast, do us a solid. Subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. Okay, let's get back to the solutions part of the Hacking Engagement podcast. Well, I'll tell you what, the Room 111 Studios likes to branch out. And we're branching out in a big way today. We're going east to the Big Apple, New York City, and we're going to talk to a big man. We're going to talk to Norman Eng, who just wrote this magnificent book called Teaching College. Now, Norman was on my buddy Jennifer Gonzalez Cult of Pedagogy podcast. So I look at the title of this podcast, and it's very engaging and captivating. I listen to Norman. I get his book immediately, and I knew who I had to contact to get on my podcast. How's things in the Big Apple today, my man Norman?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's a kind of a rainy, sunny day. So, but you know, the weather's getting warmer.
Yeah.
And Jim, can I say that I love the title? Hacking Engagement. It's perfect.
You absolutely may say that.
It perfectly captures exactly the kinds of things I'm talking about, but for the college level. So there it is. That name is taken.
Hey, sir, I'll tell you what. I was so impressed with your book because here's what I do, and you know this a little bit because we had a little side conversation. But it's going to be good to set this up. I was tasked to teach a CCP class, a college class to high school juniors and seniors. And I was worried that teaching it the standard way, the stand and deliver way, the lecture for 50-minute way was just going to be awful for them and for me. And so I'm constantly searching for different tactics to pull them in, to grab them by the virtual lapels and draw them in. And your book, man, it's like coming across a trough of water in the Mojave Desert. So it's just
that's great.
So it just came at a perfect time. I love what you've wrote. And
yeah.
And I'm going to dive right in, man.
Absolutely.
Because you wrote this book. It came out a grand total of a month ago. Is that right?
Yeah, it came out in January,
Okay.
mid-January, so a couple of months ago. But the paperback came out recently, about a month ago.
Okay, but it's definitely got a 2017 copyright on it.
Definitely.
And I'm going to wager that you didn't always teach this way.
Absolutely not.
So
No.
describe how you used to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that I came from a K-12 background. And in fact, I always say that I'm lucky to come from a K-12 background because that's something that I bring to the university level. And it's funny when you mentioned a little earlier just about teaching college and how you have to deliver this 50-minute kind of lecture, kind of the way colleges are done. And for me, that was a huge thing that I also had trouble with, just coming in and kind of doing things the traditional college way.
Right.
But, coming from a K-12 background, there's so many useful strategies from K-12 to bring to higher ed. But, when I first started teaching, I was just trying to figure out, how to do that.
Well, hold on, Norman.
Go for it.
I got to jump in here because what you're saying is impactful. Are you insinuating that college professors might actually have something to learn from K-12 teachers?
I think there's no question that they do. I think there's this kind of feeling. I think that we all feel that they think they know everything.
Yeah.
And they know a lot. There's no question about that.
They do.
But what they know is really the content side of it.
Yes.
The pedagogy side of it's a complete different question.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the way I thought when I came into teaching college. I wasn't sure, should I kind of teach the way that I know that colleges tend to be, this kind of lecturing, this kind of presenting format. And that's the way that I went into it first.
Right.
I didn't put much thought into that student experience, right? The way I learned was here, I would go to the department would actually give me a syllabus of the previous professor who used to teach the subject or the course, and I would take that syllabus and I would adopt it for, whatever I needed for my class. So I'd be using the same textbooks, I'd be using the same articles, and I'd be adopting the same course policies. But you can see the problem in doing that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that influenced the way that I planned and talked. So I would think things like, this week's topic is on major figures who shaped educational thought in the 20th century. Let's just pull out the old PowerPoint template, the one that the publisher provided along with the textbook, and I'll modify it. And so, go ahead.
And so you're following this model, and you're up there in front of those students, and you're sensing that you aren't connecting. You're sensing that what you're saying is not hitting home. Is that what happened to you? Yeah,
because the truth is that I look at when I'm teaching these students and I'm seeing that, it's just not registering, and the truth is that I think I've always relied on kind of my personality, which is very, very much, I kind of, passion comes through. You understand because you have that exact same thing,
right.
That ebullient personality. But it's honestly, it's not a sustainable approach. It's you're relying on what you're natural at, but it's not, a sustainable instructional approach.
Norman, I have to lay this story on you. I bet this resonates with you. I'm a pretty high energy guy.
Oh, definitely.
And
Love it.
So I'm up there and I'm teaching, and when I sense that body language start to fold, when I see they're, looking at their phones, when I'm not getting the responses I want, I would try even harder, which was counterproductive.
Yeah.
And so I'm so with what you're saying. Keep going, my man.
Yeah, I mean, there's this kind of, they always say certain teachers have this with itness, right? They're kind of with it. They're on top of the situation. They read the class very well,
right.
like you do. You pick up when energy is starting to slack off or when they're starting to lose attention and focus and things like that. And then you change things around, or, you kind of show even more passion about that. And, that's a great thing to have, this certain with itness. But at the same time, it has to be paired with kind of the proper instructional approach. And for me, that led to a lot of, these Eureka moments when
Right.
I was in college teaching in front of these kids and then realizing I had to change.
One of my big Eureka moments, along what we're just talking about right now, was about 5 or 6 years ago. I watched a TED Talk.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this thing, and 15 minutes slid by in a heartbeat. But by the minute 15, I was kind of ready for the whole thing to wrap up, even though I was very interested in what this young woman was saying. So I thought to myself, okay, that was a really engaging presentation. And it took 15 minutes, and I'm trying to do this for 50.
Yeah, I mean,
So Ted knows something. Ted's on to something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why these TED Talks typically average 17 minutes long, because there's actual research that shows that people's attention flag between 15 and 20 minutes into a presentation. Right. So our attention just naturally, I don't care if you're 6 years old, 7 years old, or if you're 50, 60 years old, it doesn't matter. Right. We all kind of have this attention span that's going to flag after a certain amount of time. So that's why these TED Talks last less than 20 minutes.
Very good. And so you started talking about Eureka Moments, and I interrupted. So
no worries. Yeah.
So let me hear about those.
Sure. So for me, there's actually been a couple of these Eureka Moments. And one of them was when I was starting out teaching, I used to assign these oral presentations, right? Students would have to do these oral presentations, something that many professors and teachers do, right? Students have to choose a topic, they present that topic, but I remember listening one day, right? I think you already know where I'm headed with this, right? Yeah. I'm listening to a student present in front of the class, I'm taking my notes, I'm evaluating the student's presentation, and then my eyes start to kind of look around at the rest of the class. And you can imagine what you see.
It's like a battlefield.
Yeah, because they're losing their attention. They're bored to tears. They're checking their phones. Yeah. Basically everything except really engaged and focused on the speaker. And so this was confirmed. Like when I give out these end of the semester evaluations for students. And one thing they said was that they liked presentations because it gave them the experience to speak in front of the class and things of that nature. But many more of them actually said that, they felt that they prefer if I do more talking, if I did more of the teaching. Because for them, they have no stake in listening to their classmates. It's boring. Yeah. And so the takeaway that I got out of that exchange, that Eureka moment, was presenting is a skill, right? Without it, people are not going to listen. They're going to lose interest. And presenting to classmates is just a waste of time because I saw it over and over again, semester after semester. And I vowed then and there to change my approach the following semester. And, that's kind of when I thought, I used to pitch clients all the time because I came from a marketing background. So we would pitch new clients. And the lesson that I learned out of marketing was you have to know who you're talking to. You have to respect. You have to talk to them on their terms. And that led me to change the way I lectured and change the way that I present.
Now, Norman, what you're talking about here at the college level is unorthodox. It had to take some chutzpah to take this step away from the standard stand and deliver 50-minute lecture. Sure. Congratulations.
You're absolutely right. It's the truth is that it a lot of it depends on the discipline that we're in. So in a field like education, I tend to see more unorthodox ways. Just because a lot of the education professors have that background, especially in the K-12 world. And so they're doing a lot more of this kind of, active learning approach. But in other industries, especially like in STEM or in, English composition, things like that, it's very straightforward. And there are a lot of great professors in those disciplines, of course, and they're doing very unorthodox things as well. But it's easy to just kind of do that stand and deliver, like you said.
Norm, let me tell you real quick about a Eureka moment I have that I'm very confident will resonate with you. I teach in a history class. It's a college-level history class. And I created this lecture that mirrored the reading. And what I found was then the students were not doing the reading. And my question to myself is, why should they?
That is exactly
I am telegraphing to them exactly what I think is important in this reading. So that was my Eureka moment. Did you have one similar?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So it's the same thing as like when I'm teaching and I'm using PowerPoints as well. Because the truth is, a lot of times when I use the PowerPoints, you know how you see a lot of people who present, they're reading off of their PowerPoints and
should be illegal.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that there's actual, cognitive psychology research that shows that people aren't able to do two things at once, meaning that listening to you, the speaker, read out loud what's on the slide, and for the audience to also look at the slide. It's difficult for them to absorb and learn information when they have competing things going on at the same time.
And it's insulting.
It is because, yes, of course. Well, it's funny. I've actually heard the term that the worst kind of PowerPoint is when the speaker is reading the words that the audience can see, and he or she leaves a leave behind with the exact same PowerPoint. So they call that like the triple play. With all three things going on at once, all saying the same thing, and none of it is actually helping. So that's a huge, huge problem, and that kind of leads into my second Eureka moment. If you don't mind, I could tell
my man. Hit
that.
Me.
Well, it's really when I think it was it might have been the second semester that I was teaching a Foundations of Education course, which basically means students are learning the history of education and the major philosophies in education. And I had a PowerPoint, right? I had all my open-ended questions planned out. Mm-hmm. But the problem was that after I did the presentations, after I leveraged my personality and I asked questions and they seemed engaged, the problem was that when I gave them the midterm, most of them failed.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, what's going on in here? They seemed engaged in the classroom, and I, used the PowerPoints. I had open-ended questions, but then I found out, or then I slowly discovered that I was putting way too much into the lecture, right?
Right.
So you know how, like, when you ask the students to read a chapter or an article or whatever to prepare for the next class, what happens when you start doing a PowerPoint presentation on the whole thing? You're basically covering everything, right? So you just can't do that. That's a huge problem. And I think a lot of people rely on covering the information as opposed to deepening the content.
Okay, Norman, here's what I did last week thanks to your book.
I'm curious.
Okay, so we're doing a unit on the colonization of sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm-hmm.
The reading's great. I mean, it lays it out perfectly. So there's no sense in me going through it from point A to point B. But what I did notice in the reading was that the Berlin Conference, where the Europeans basically divided up the continent of Africa without any African input, was not covered thoroughly enough in the reading. So that was the only topic of my lecture. What do you think of that, sir?
That's the point, is that you are trying to deepen a connection with the students on something that is important. Mm-hmm. And that's up to you. That's up to the teacher, right? The teacher has that expertise. But it's the problem when they think that, I have to cover everything, just like you had mentioned before.
Right.
That's going to help students. But if you feel like a certain portion is missing or wasn't covered enough that you needed to delve into, or there are a couple of complex topics that students may have trouble understanding, to go much, much deeper into that one or two thing, that's the most important part.
And focus on one or two things. I hear you say that, and that's powerful.
It is, because the truth is that we are so conditioned with PowerPoint for some reason or another. Maybe it's just because of experience with it, that we think it's all about covering content. You know, and the truth is, like, I get it, right? As high school teachers, as college professors, there is a curriculum that we have to cover. But you can't just literally cover the whole thing from, like you said, A to Z without sacrificing something.
Right.
And what usually sacrifices is student deep understanding of something. So isn't it better just to have 1, 2, or 3 important things that they truly get, as opposed to superficially covering 20 or 25 things?
And allow them to get into that text and figure it out.
It is. It's you know, think about it. It's kind of like when you ask a student to kind of dig deep into something. The truth is, when you're doing a presentation and you're talking about a bunch of things, I can't remember the exact statistic, but they said something like students remember much less than you think. So we think that we're giving them 5 or 6 or 7 things, but the truth is, you're lucky if they remember 1 thing.
And I'll take it another step further. You turn that text over to them. You allow them to figure it out, and then if they need help, push them to start relying on each other.
Yeah, why not have them drive the lesson?
Norman,
that's something we talk about a lot. Yep.
Norman, I just love what you have to say, and I've got to segue into the next thing, because I'm really taken by this. I'm really captivated by this concept in your book, and it's your template, your approach to teaching a lesson that I think is fantastic. It's called You, Y'all, and We. Now, that sounds like Southern Ohio talk right there, man.
It's definitely not up here in the north, that's for sure.
Lay it on me, man. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so first off, I want to make sure this is not a concept that I developed. This was something that was really popularized by a scholar named Magdalene Lampert, and she's actually a math education expert out of Michigan University, and actually a former elementary school teacher. In order to really understand this you, y'all, we approach, you have to kind of recognize, or let's just kind of compare that with the old traditional approach to instruction, which sometimes has been called I, we, you, or I do, we do, you do, right? And so this is basically, and you kind of have an understanding of that as it is, right? This is where
I've done it.
this is the teacher-focused instructional approach, right? This is where the teacher shows the kids something first. That's the I. Then the students practice it as a class, whatever the strategy that they're practicing as a class, that's the we. And then finally, they go off to their seats and do something on their own. That's the you, right? I do, we do, you do. So here, the teacher is the expert. The teacher is kind of, it's a teacher-directed kind of instructional approach where they're the expert, you do exactly what they say, and then you practice it, and then you do it on their own. So there's nothing wrong with it per se, all right? It's, everything is appropriate depending on the situation. But the problem with that is that it is difficult for students to always understand a complicated concept, right? So let's just say they're doing some sort of a lesson on fractions or something. And the teacher says, okay, here's a strategy that I use to figure out fractions, right? That's the I part. And then, okay, here's another problem that we can practice on our own with a fraction. And then they go off and do a bunch of worksheets, all right? The problem with that is that the student, there isn't necessarily deep conceptual understanding of a fraction, because it's the teacher that teaches that concept. There is no internalizing, no struggle, no working things out. And that's where Magdalene Lampert's idea of you, y'all, we comes in. Because it flips the I, we, you approach the other way around. Yeah. Right? Students are the focus. They work things out on their own. So instead of, let's just say, the teacher modeling a strategy, children start by exploring a problem. Right? They grapple with it. They do it on their own. Right? That's the you part of it. Yeah. Then they work in pairs or in groups, and they share what they've worked out, or they brainstorm or something like that until they come up with some sort of consensus or solution. That's the y'all part of it. Right? Finally, The class comes together, and that's where you talk it out. That's where you discuss what you've learned, the we. So that's the you, y'all, we.
I love it. I love it, man. And let me give you another scenario. This was today. This was just an hour ago.
Okay.
Thanks to your book. I had to try this. So we're talking about Indian independence and nonviolent protest, which seems so straightforward. Simple, nothing to it. But there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah.
And the kids just look at that and they're like, okay, I got it. You know, you don't respond and all the neutral people get on your side and then you win.
Yeah.
Okay, nothing to it. There's a lot more to it than that. So I had to do exactly what you're saying. I had to build anticipation and interest in this subject. So individually, I had them formulate a policy for eradicating ISIS. Then in a group of 4, I had them share their ideas. And then as a class, I would have each group talk about their solutions. Guess what? They could rarely come to any consensus whatsoever because defeating ISIS is a complicated proposition.
Sounds like real life. Yep.
So all of a sudden, then, we segue into nonviolent protest, give them a number of scenarios. Would nonviolent protest have worked with Hitler? Would nonviolent protest, or say that the American civil rights movement was violent instead of nonviolent?
Right.
Gave them a number of scenarios, and I've taught that lesson a lot of years. I've never had the anticipation for the reading and the subject matter and the original sources like I had today, Norman. What you're saying is gold, man. What you're saying is gold.
That is unbelievable. I mean, and I think the key is you put the thinking or the learning back into the hands of the student. That's clearly what's happening in your example today.
Instead of just plopping in your seats and say, okay, Mr. Sturman's going to be talking about nonviolent protest for the next 15 minutes, I can kind of hang with him some.
The truth is, like, the minute you say that, right, about nonviolent, like, it's such an abstract thing. I'm going to talk about Indian protest and nonviolent protesting, and just talking about already sounds like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose interest in it because it's such an abstract thing. It's so far removed. But just imagine you talk about things that are more relevant, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whatever kind of current protest or historical protests as well. Okay. And all of a sudden, it just becomes real and concrete. Because that's the point.
Each one of those kids has sat at a dinner table and heard Dad yelling at the news at night talking about what needs to be done about ISIS. So it was easy to get that conversation rolling. And
because I'm sure they all have their own opinions already because of their of such experiences with their parents.
So one of the keys here is if you can find a great hook like that's relevant, that's applicable to their lives, you're in business, man.
It's absolutely changed. And I know that the YouYallWe kind of mindset has also revolutionized, a lot of the way that teachers are teaching even STEM subjects like math and science, where you give a student a problem just to struggle with. And then all of a sudden, there's a reason to understand the formula. There's a reason, that we have to know proofs because they've been struggling to begin with, and now there's a solution to figure it out. But you can't do it. You can't give them the solution first. You can't give them the formula first. You can't give them the steps to solve something first because then there's no learning. There's no struggle. That's the point.
I love that. And let me make a prediction here, and I might be off base on this, but I have a strong feeling this is the case. When you come to professors, when you come to K-12 teachers and you promote this, some of them are probably intimidated by the concept of changing everything. And what you need to think about, what I need to think about is you don't do it all the time. I mean, you can do it every fourth period or so. But I think what you'll find is those are the best periods you have. And
I'm so glad you bring that up because I have professors who do ask that same question, meaning like, is that something we're expected to do? Is the YouYallWe something we expected to do every single time? And I say no. The truth is that that's why I said before that the I, we, you, there's nothing wrong with it per se. In fact, there's nothing wrong with lectures per se. There's nothing wrong with standing up and using PowerPoint. As long as you know how to do that, and as long as it's not the only way that you teach, then that's okay. But
Beautiful.
we see far too many of that in the high school level, especially at the college level. And in truth, there's a lot of great stuff that I see in the elementary school level. I do see a lot of hands-on, aside from the whole testing thing that's been going on for the past decade or so. Aside from that, there is a lot of good teaching that I see, a lot of active stuff going on. Truthfully, in all levels, in primary, secondary, and even college level, you do see a lot of great stuff that teachers are doing, but it's not the norm. And that's what I'm trying to change.
Norman, you wrote the perfect book for the perfect time, man. It's just an outstanding decision on your part. I'm so glad you did it.
I appreciate that.
And we're gonna hook you up with one more question here, and it's just. Somebody's sitting here listening to this, and they're thinking, yeah, geez, like your professor friends, there's another thing I got to do. Take some pressure off them. Pull some anxiety off their body right now, and give them some advice. Give them some encouragement.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that you and I, we all know that teaching is not easy. So, I hate to give something that's like, oh, start this tomorrow and it'll change your world, because the truth is we all know that it'll never work out. But there are certainly some mindsets that you can adapt, that you can, kind of incorporate in the way that you approach teaching, and that will change the way your students respond. So, kind of like what we've been talking about, my advice is all about embracing this idea of active learning, right? The idea that, that students shouldn't be passively listening to teachers. And so, And so many teachers and professors do, in fact, actually have active learning classrooms, but like we had said a little prior, there's not enough. And they're focused on the formulas and the procedures and other passive ways of learning. And I get it. Real life happens. There are AP tests to prepare for. There are statewide exams to prepare for, and things of that nature. But the point is that teachers can change student engagement immediately by taking whatever abstract concept, like you were saying with the nonviolent protest, and making it concrete, meaningful, relating it to students in some way. So, I love to give examples. So like if you're teaching a PowerPoint presentation, or you're using a PowerPoint presentation on whether it's, Eastern religion or, World War II and the Yalta Conference. So these are all things that are abstract and non-relatable to kids, to students.
Right.
But every week when I plan my lesson, I ask myself, how can I turn what I'm about to teach? How can I turn that idea into a YouYallWe?
Yes,
so
yes.
If every teacher could at least start their lesson planning process by asking that question. And again, maybe not every lesson will require a YouYallWe, and maybe in fact some of them shouldn't have a YouYallWe, right? Because there are certain kinds of things that we teach. Maybe you're teaching kind of a template to writing a persuasive essay. You're not just going to ask students to just start figuring out on your own per se. Sometimes you do need to provide steps. Sometimes you need to model something in a la I, we, you. But if you start your lesson planning just by asking that question, how might I turn this into a YouYallWe lesson? That can already change the way that students will respond.
Because
the truth is it takes, me kind of planning takes up 80% of my planning time. Like, I'm not worried about what I'm teaching, right? We're all worried about how we're teaching. And that's why I keep saying that teachers are creators or designers of meaningful experiences. That's really what our major role is. We're not there to teach per se. We're trying to find meaningful experiences that'll get students to think deeply, to work deeply about a certain concept.
Hey, that's
Yeah.
beautiful, my friend. Now, and I love it. And I'm gonna throw one more piece of encouragement to try to motivate people even more. When I did this today, it didn't take much time. What I did is I put a Google stopwatch on the smartboard and I gave them 2 minutes to formulate their own strategy.
Nice.
And then I gave them 2 minutes to interact with a small group. And that's, Norman, when I walked around the room and listened and joined little group conversations.
Yep.
And I looked up and we were at 10 minutes.
So, can I tell you, I do the same thing with the stopwatch.
Yeah.
You use the stopwatch, you give them a specific time because they need to know how long to kind of talk about. There's nothing worse than kind of saying, oh, okay, let's talk, but how long? Is it 10 minutes or is it 2 minutes? So it's important to kind of have that focus, this sense of urgency. So I love that.
And then also, groups of 3 work really well because then they have to try to negotiate a consensus. It can't be a 2 and 2 thing.
Yeah, and that's why it's always nice to kind of have them first kind of brainstorm or think by themselves before they get into the groups of 3. Because you're going to have learners that are maybe processing a little bit slower, need a little bit more time, or maybe they're not even native English speakers. And so for them, it's harder to articulate. So these students need a little bit of time to think on their own, to come up with their own ideas. And then when they join their group of 3 or 4 or whatever, that's when, ideas can be sparked.
And Norman, that's beautiful. And here's one thing that I struggle with. Maybe you do as well. Pretty high energy guy.
Yeah.
Pretty hyper guy. I get nervous when I see kids not participating in their little small group.
Yeah.
But I need to work on my patience with that, because what I found today was, in their own way, they were participating, and it didn't look like how I would do it. The truth is that there is no easy answer to kind of help the student that looks like they're not participating, right? They're just kind of sitting there and others are kind of talking in the group and they're not saying anything. And so because I have these students just like you every single semester, and I do struggle with trying to get them to participate. And there's one thing that I do try to help out with that I found can be helpful, is that I offer other ways to participate, because not all of them are great speakers. Not all of them feel comfortable in a group. So like, for example, I have one student who I've encouraged to just email me. Just talk to me directly, whether one-to-one, face-to-face, or whether through email. And she's done that. She's emailed me things and she's talked about things, and it's an alternative. And you know what? Why can't she do that? Why not, right? I know that in the end, yes, of course, it's important to develop these skills where you're able to talk within a group and to present in front of a crowd and things of that nature. But honestly, you can't sacrifice the relationship you have. Amen. And I want to tell you, there's a happy ending to this. Those students that I didn't think were engaged, that I didn't think were participating, when I called on them, their answers were outstanding. So sometimes you just can't judge a situation by its appearance. Particularly if you're looking at it from your own perspective. They
can't all be like you and me and just hyper energy.
Thank goodness.
That'd be tough.
So Norman, what's the next book about?
Well, I'm thinking about taking each one of those chapters, to tell you the truth, and really expanding on each one of them. So, for example, I have a chapter just on PowerPoint, and I'm thinking of why not just create another ebook just delving into the nitty-gritty, because I've actually had a lot of professors say, Norman, I really like what you wrote in chapter such and such on PowerPoints. Can you elaborate on it even more? And so why not? So what I might do is kind of find out which chapters do instructors find the most useful, and really just delve into that. Maybe turn each one of those chapters into its own book. So that's definitely I want to focus more on. One other thing is that I'd really like to incorporate more technology into. Actually, that's something that I'm trying to get you to help out on, because clearly, especially with some of the stuff that we've been talking about off the air, just with Google Classrooms and Edpuzzle and things like that, they would imagine how that would help in the college classroom.
Norman,
so
those guys need to
bend your ear on that stuff.
They need to flip those bad boys. They need to flip those lectures and get those kids applying when they get into class. And that's active learning, man. That's active. Sir, I'll tell you what, you've just been a joy. I mean, you've just been a joy to talk to. I could listen to you all day. I'm certainly engaged in what you have to say. You got to keep going, man. You got good stuff.
I really appreciate that, Jim. Thanks for having me here. The whole point of the book was that a lot of it's based on the K-12 stuff, and you clearly have so much going on in the K-12 world in terms of what's worked. So like I said, I'd love to continue bending your ear and getting a lot of your expertise from that, especially from the high school side, and see what can we do to incorporate it into the higher ed side. So it's people like you, man. That's what it's all about.
And I'm going to tell you something right now. This profession is changing by the second. And if you are going to be and I've been doing it for 32 years, man. I mean, if you're going to be teaching like you were 10 years ago, you're going
even 10 years.
You're really going to struggle, man. You've got to get on this train.
There's no question about that.
You got to fight to stay relevant, man.
I mean, and the truth is, if you don't, who are you? You are hurting the kids, because the kids are different. The students, are a different generation from you, and they have specific modes of learning. They have specific ways that they prefer to do things, and you have to be. That's this kind of marketing mindset is something I always talk about in my book, and it's the idea that you have to know your target audience. You have to know who you're speaking to. If you don't understand that they prefer to speak via texting, then you're not understanding the way they work. You're not understanding this 21st century world, and that's just it. So you got to keep relevant. That's exactly what you said.
And they like videos.
They absolutely do. And I hope those videos need to be short.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Norman, you have a wonderful day in Manhattan. You going to go hang out at Central Park after this, or you're probably too darn busy?
I do. I got so much other stuff going on, especially for next week planning. But I'll try to have a little bit of fun. Technically, this is our spring break week, so I should be traveling.
Listen, you guys get our weather a day later, and right now I'm looking at just pure blue skies and 70-degree temps, so that's coming your way tomorrow, my man.
Sounds good. I love it. I should take a little time, maybe go to Central Park.
Do it. I mean, heck, if one of your students was as busy as you'd probably tell them to take a day off.
You know what? That's the greatest thing that you've said.
All right, my man.
Right. All right, Jim. We'll talk
soon,
soon, okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Bye.
Okay, here we are at the What You Can Do Tomorrow section. I hope you are itching to get into class tomorrow and try this approach. Try this template. You need to start out with some thought-provoking question that you issue to the entire class. And I think it's better if this thought-provoking question is subtle, not exactly giving away what the lesson's all about. If you're teaching about variables in algebra class, ask your students the following. Describe for me the last time you solved a mystery. What were some obstacles involved in that? Or if you're introducing Catcher in the Rye in your language arts class, how about this? Ask the students, what do you miss most about being a little kid? Or if you're in earth science, you're talking about plate tectonics, ask them this. Describe for me something that you moved that was really heavy. Also, check it out. If you're in kinesiology class and you're talking about flexibility, lay this one on them. What's a school rule that you think needs to be changed? So once you have that thought-provoking question out to kids, give them a couple minutes to think on their own. Then break them up into small groups and give them a couple minutes to talk about what they came up with. See if they can come to some consensus. Then have a class discussion or debriefing where everyone gets to throw out some ideas and you can have a class conversation. After you've done that, you can jump into the lecture, you can jump into the reading, you can jump into the lesson. You will have primed the pump. Good luck tomorrow engaging your students.
Show notes for this episode can be found at jamesallensturdivant.com. If you enjoy Hacking Engagement, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes.